Violence against women and girls remain one of the most prevalent and pervasive human rights violations in the world. According to the UN, a woman is killed every 10 minutes. This silent epidemic is only getting worse. So what drives this violence? Is it purely the actions of individual men? Or does the problem lie in deeper societal structures that systematically undervalue women? Are men alone to blame, or do factors like flawed upbringing and rigid gender roles contribute? And why is violence against women more prevalent in certain regions as compared to others? Today on To The Point, we are discussing violence against women. Is it an epidemic that no one cares about? Hello and welcome to The Point. I'm Isha Bhatia-Sanin here in Berlin, and to discuss this very sensitive topic, I have three women from three different cultural backgrounds. First on the panel is Gilda Sahebi. She is a German Iranian journalist, a trained physician and an author. She writes actively on discrimination and violence against women in Iran. My next guest is Zohra Suri Nursad. She is a German Afghan activist and social entrepreneur. With her charitable project, she supports women and children in Afghanistan. And joining us via Skype from India, we have Yogita Bhayana. She is an anti-rape activist. Her organization supports rape survivors get justice in India. A very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining. Now, let's take each country one after the other. Gilda, Iran has this mandatory law that women have to cover their heads at all times when they are in public. And now the state is saying that if women decide not to do this, then they would be sent to clinics, to hospitals to get treatment. What kind of treatment are they really talking about?
It's no kind of treatment. It has nothing to do with treatment. So women in Iran are supposed not only to cover their heads, but also their body. So basically only hands are supposed to be free and the face. And a lot of women have defied this mandatory hijab law for 2 years now, more than 2 years. So the government has tried everything to get women to obey again, but they haven't been able to do that. They've changed laws, they made rigid, horrible, brutal laws that women have their cars towed, they get their bank accounts closed, they cannot leave the country, they have to pay incredible amounts of money when they don't wear their headscarf outside. And still, they did not stop taking it down. A lot of women in Iran right now are leaving the house without their headscarves. So now, I guess the next step that the regime is taking is saying, well, they're crazy, and so we need to treat them. And I mean, that's not a new narrative. Women have been called crazy for hundreds of years when they do what they want, basically.
But when they say they're crazy and they need treatment, is there a threat? Are they being told that, you know, they would be tortured in the clinics? Or what do you make of this?
I mean, it's not clinics. It's the same that women experience in prisons. It's basically a lot of women or people in prison in Iran, they get some kind of sedation, medication. We don't really know what they're giving them. Violence, torture, sexual abuse. So all of that is going to happen there too.
That's horrible. Well, while we're talking of laws, Afghanistan has this law called the Vice and Virtue Law. And that is apparently the most repressive and most discriminatory law that Taliban has brought about. Can you explain what is it?
Yeah, I think the important thing is that the Taliban have violence institutionalizing for every in Afghanistan, so that women are extremely in danger, and the femicides are the worst escalation, but of a spiral of violence that affects women long before they die. But the problem is in Afghanistan, the causes are deeply rooted, and that's the Taliban wrap every right from a woman. We now see a lot of women, for example, that have no opinion to live like a woman, like a human, and it's I'm really sad, and I can't explain because I'm speechless about the what the Taliban want that women are forced.
Well, if I read from the law, it says that women are duty-bound to hide their voice, face, and body. So
Yes.
they can't even speak in public.
Yes, I can say it is a wonder that the women can beaten, that can be inside of the house and have the right to live, because it's not.
They're not being treated as humans. So
Yes,
they have to have permission from everyone.
in the eyes of the Taliban.
It's quite a scary situation. Yogita, let me come to you. Now, we're discussing Iran and Afghanistan, and the situation in India is, of course, not comparable with these countries because, of course, there's no state-sponsored violence against women. But despite being a democracy, fact remains that India is on the list of one of the most dangerous countries for women on earth. Why do you think is that so?
It is because of the brutality, and definitely we can't compare with the other two countries, and the challenges they have are different than what we have, because we all are having our own challenges, but at the same time the kind of form we have is like more of, you can say the 40% of the population, which is actually the 50% of the population, out of which 40% are reported crimes against women, so you can say those are reported crimes. When we talk about those ones which are not even come to the limelight or not on papers, you can imagine the kind of the maximum the kind of atrocities are happening here. So we can only see the tip of the iceberg. Now.
Oh, we seem to have lost Yogita, but we'll continue here. So when we talk about violence against women, it's not just about Iran, Afghanistan, or just India. It's a global phenomenon. And according to the UN, almost 90,000 women and girls were murdered worldwide in 2022. Over half of them were killed by their partner or a family member. That is more than 5 killings per hour. And there's absolutely no country or community that is unaffected by this.
Mourning the murder of a woman. Femicides are widespread in many African countries. One example, Ugandan sports icon Rebecca Cheptegei. She fell victim to a brutal attack by her ex-boyfriend. In Central and South America, femicide is an everyday occurrence. In Brazil, a woman is killed because of her gender every 6 hours, and activists have dubbed Mexico a femicide nation. In India, the rape of a female doctor has recently caused an uproar after the 31-year-old was found dead in a hospital. The case, one of many in the world's most populous country, sparked massive protests. In Iran, a woman is murdered by family members almost every other day. Women who defend themselves risk prison and torture. And in Afghanistan, Taliban policies render women publicly invisible and defenseless against sexual violence. And even in Germany, a woman dies almost every day at the hands of a man. Is femicide the ignored danger?
Let's go back to Yogita. Yogita, you were making a point. While you continue, I'd also like you to reflect on the fact that India is quite a big and diverse country. And so, of course, rural setup is different from the cities. And one would assume that women are more unsafe in villages. But when you think of the recent Kolkata doctors' rape and murder case and the Delhi rape case that you've been very actively involved in, doesn't that show that women are not even safe in cities? And isn't there any willingness on the side of the government to make any changes?
Absolutely, you're right. There is no phenomena called rural, being unsafe for women, and urban cities are safe for women, because we have seen Kolkata or Delhi, or recently last week only a girl was raped in the heart of the city. So we can't say that it's safe for any woman anywhere in India. At the same time, I would like to bring about, the outrage which happens because it happens in the city, and the limelight it gets because it happens in the city is different. But in our rural villages, far from the, the kind of urban setup, our women are suffering every single day. It's just that the crimes are reported much more in the urban cities. Also, there is another angle to it. But when it happens in the capital of the country, which is supposed to be, we supposed to be feel safe, and we supposed to be called, developing country, and when it happens in the heart of the, the capital, I think it really gives a very, very kind of alarming signal. When if we are not safe in the city, and that too, the center of the city. This last week episode happened. So one can imagine what was the fate of a woman in India, like who's staying far places, So that's really heart-wrenching.
But isn't there any attempt from the government side to make changes to this?
On papers, yes, they are trying. They say there is always a verbal kind of commitment. They bring about a lot of reforms after that Mathura case. There were amendments in 1983. And after Nirbhaya in 2012, there was Justice Verma recommendation, which turned into policies in 2018. Also, we saw those reforms. We saw Vishakha reforms after Babri Devi case. But unfortunately, those reforms remained on papers. If you, till today, if you ask me, yesterday also we dealt with a case of a child in the city. The SOPs are not followed. The protocols are not followed. The sensitivity is not there. So everything is there on the paper, but if I talk about implementation, we are still where we were. Right. And I'm talking about where we were in terms of 1980s, when the custodial rape of that girl happened in Maharashtra. We are still standing there. There is no safety even in the custody. You can see in our case, we have seen how the father was killed in the custody when he went to report the case for the girl's sexual violence. So I can't see any changes, and I don't see any willpower. I really genuinely don't see willpower of any government, whether state or center, to really take it on a mission mode. They just do talking about it. They show their sympathy, but unfortunately, they don't want to work on it, and they think it's not their election agenda or not their priority anymore.
All right. So things have changed on paper, but there is no willingness on the side of government. That's what we hear from India. So she's mentioned a case that she briefly said, Mathura rape case, which was in 1972. So India's moved, at least on paper, from 1970s. But when I talk of Iran of the 1970s, when we see photos and we see that women actually were wearing much more modern clothes back then, was it just women wearing modern clothes, or was Iran a different place for women back then?
Of course, it was a different place because they were physically safer. You didn't have to fear every time you left the house, I might end up in prison, or I might end up beaten up or dead. So yes, of course, it was a different place. You see that in the clothes that they were wearing. So basically, it's just that the law obviously was different, and it was, of course, still not paradise for women. Women still went through sexual abuse, and it was still not a country of equality, of course. But on paper, the law said that women then had more rights than today.
And what really changed after the revolution in 1979? Everything changed. One of the first decrees that the new regime put on was that women had to wear the hijab. It was very clear from the beginning that this dictatorship, this leadership of clerics, that the first thing they wanted to do was to put down women. And they, of course, deducted that from their religion. They said that we want to be different than the West. Here in Iran, in the Islamic Republic, we have morals, we have rules, and we're not as morally down as the West is. So it was also kind of, we are different. And the case of women and the suppression of women is one of the main and central pillars of this whole dictatorship. And so it was there from the beginning. So would you say it's religion that's responsible for the oppression? Or would you separate dictatorship from religion?
I don't really care who's responsible. It's not my place to say anything about that. All I can say is that they use religion to do that. Any patriarchal system is going to find something to use to suppress women. In Iran, it's religion, and they put, so-called clerics in the justice system, where they say to women, you are worth half than a man. That's the law. So the problem is, of course, in Iran, when you have a country, and that's the difference to India, the state structure says women are worth less. And that is additional to all the sexist and narratives that are already in a society. So when you have structures, government structures that tell you to suppress women, then of course it's a different level. So women are going to have physical violence and abuse all over in every part of life.
I think Yogita wanted to pitch in.
So I think here we can relate when in the garb of religion, when we try to suppress a particular gender and being sexist in that term, I think we also face those challenges, because all our rituals are focused on men, leading it, and women are, shown very, kind of in the second in command in terms of, performing rituals to even being the leader of the family. Religious setup also is dominated by men. So I think they also rule a lot of, they impose a lot of kind of implication in terms of, covering the head and to even, killing of the female fetus. I mean, this is also part of the religious thing. Then they ask for a son, This is all the part of the mushrooming and, you can say the conditioning that way it has happened. But even our religions are also all male dominating for that matter. I think that's where we can relate to Iran for that matter.
So that's something that's common between most Asian countries, that they're very patriarchal structures. Now, both of you, you've come from Asian countries to Germany. So you understand the West European German society as much as you understand Iran and Afghanistan. How do you see patriarchy here versus patriarchy there? Are there any parallels? Are there any differences?
I think in Germany we say that are very in the future for the human rights, and but when we say example, when a woman want to go to help, find help, the patriarchal system is so. It makes it difficult for these women, because they are not the trust if she said the truth when she told about her violence in the at home, because there is no police to document this situation. And in Afghanistan, we also know that Taliban make it institutionalizing this problem that you can do violence against women. But it is important to know that in Germany or in the Western, this problem is also the same, but the difference are a little bit hidden, that you can't find the reason how the problem is bad. I think when you talk with women, they go to system to get help. You can find the problems that the government in Germany are not really have a law that it's for the women. It's very difficult to find the way, because it's a problem with the money. When you show a woman she's working and have children, and when she want to go at the safe house, she have to pay 100 a night. And how can be this? Because she lost a little bit in her life and have to pay for her freedom. It's not possible in my eyes.
Right. So we are discussing, of course, Asian countries here because we have 3 Asian women from Afghanistan, Iran and India. But that does not change the fact that things are not really very nice in the European countries either. In Germany, for instance, 155 women were killed by their partners or ex-partners in 2023. And in France, a 72-year-old woman is fighting for her rapists to be held accountable. Gisele Pelicot was drugged by her husband over the course of many years. She was raped hundreds of times, not only by her husband, but by another 50 men who also allowed themselves to be filmed while they raped her. In her closing statement in the court, Gisele said, "It's time that the macho, patriarchal society that trivializes rape changes. It's time we change the way we look at rape. It's not us who should be ashamed, it's them." Women are being harassed, raped, and killed every day, but there are only a few stories that catch our attention, like Gisele's. It's about this shame. So this is France, where she's saying, women are ashamed and that's why they don't come out. Also, another reason is that courts are not sensitized, so they have to go through the trauma all over again. Have you talked to people? Do you know how courts can be sensitized? Are there any laws that you know about that talk about this? That, when a woman goes with her complaint to the police or to the courts, there has to be a structured way that she does not go through the trauma again?
They're trying that. I know, for instance, in Berlin, they have a police station that is supposed to handle these cases in a sensitive way. And I know of a case of a woman who was harassed, and she was traumatized, and she wasn't able to go there. She wasn't sure if she should go. So she waited, and after a week, her friends told her, I think you should report this. It's important that you report it. So she goes there, and the first question they ask her is, why did it take you so long to come? And they're sensitized. This is a special place where these women are supposed to go. So even when these places that are supposed to know how to deal with people who have been traumatized by sexual abuse or harassment, even they do it wrong. So the law is not enough. We need to acknowledge, and I think that's the difference, as you also said, between the countries that we're talking about, Iran, Afghanistan, India, and Western countries. It's not explicit. In Germany, we don't say women have less value than men. Of course, no one would say that. But it's in the structures. It's systematic. For instance, in Germany, until 1997, rape inside the marriage was not illegal. So we do need to change laws, but also at the same time, we really need to work on structures and narratives. And that's way harder to do than to change laws.
Well, marital rape is also not in the law in India. Yogita, this case from France, does it have any resonance in India?
Lot of it. In fact, the kind of she's shaken, and she doesn't have faith on the system, and exactly what we see in India, and the systems are the same. I thought, I never imagined, the kind of suffering she's gone through, and still her response was really the kind of response we get from the survivors here. And exactly what happens in the courtrooms, the torture, another torture of getting repeatedly raped, in the courtrooms, and how insensitively they are dealt with is exactly the same or even worse here. So recently, I'll share one example. 2 days ago, there was a girl who was 9-year-old, got raped, and she's spending her full day in the courtroom, being medically challenged in terms of being raped. She's 9-year-old. And for her statement, she's been called to court every single day now. However, the SOP says that magistrate has to go and take her statement in the hospital. But because she was medically not that worse that she had to be admitted, so she was still suffering. But magistrate didn't go, and has been calling her every single day to the courtroom, that 9-year-old, and they are spending the whole day there. This is the 3rd day. So you can imagine the plight, and things have not changed. That's why I speak with so much of conviction.
Right, so there are horror stories everywhere. Now, we do talk about violence against women. I think what is not discussed much is that this violence is carried out by men. So why aren't there enough discussions about, how can we change the behavior of men? I know you've written a piece where you say that men are also victims to the system. How do you see men in this whole scenario?
That's a big question. Well, I think it's important to acknowledge that violence against women and girls is a problem of the whole society. It's not a problem of one gender. it's also a problem of men. Living in a patriarchy is a problem for everyone because it affects everyone. Of course, women and girls are obviously, because they get killed and raped, the first victims. At the same time, if we don't make clear that we don't need to fix the problems only for girls and women, we need to fix the problem for the whole society, things are not going to change. So if we say men are only the problem, I don't think that's going to work. I think we need to make sure that we don't need allies. We need people to fix it for everyone.
We have to fix it for everyone, and for everyone to fix it, it's most important that women should speak up, because only if they do, they would be heard. The Me Too movement is an example that when women come together, things change. And if you are a woman, tell us about your experiences. If you're a man watching this, do let us know how your fellow men can be sensitized. We'll be reading your comments. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.